Contemporary Chinese and American cinema. Actress Joan Chen once remarked to Time magazine, "The only thing I achieved going to the States was that I became an exotic beauty. I did my best to give a version of Chineseness that the West was looking for, but I also understood that that version of me was worthless." Are the cinematic and televisual representations of exotic beauty indeed worthless? Or can we find value in the subversive pleasures invoked by such representations? In this paper, I argue that the erotic overinvestment in Chinese American women like Joan Chen and Lucy Liu produces an affective surplus of desire that challenges, in American media productions, the common sense of what it means to be American. Moreover, I assert that identification with such a figure of exoticism can open a space of becoming, a transformative state wherein radical possibilities exist. Lacan's concept of the mirror stage has inspired film theories contending that spectatorial pleasure arises from the illusory power and mastery of the male gaze, fixing on a female object. However, I argue that the exotic representations of Asian American women avoid such subject-object positions, instead apprehending pure becoming, in which contradictory and slippery states coexist to elude the fixity of common sense and of the gaze. The uncommon pleasures that arise in the spectatorship of these images are compounded by the enigmatic performances of actresses like Joan Chen and Lucy Liu. Despite their contemporary fame, both Chen and Liu have been criticized for their portrayals of exotic femme fatales. I will recuperate such portrayals as forms of embodied resistance against the sexual objectification of the gaze. Through the performances of indecipherable desires, Chen and Liu's performative bodies elide visual domination and invoke jouissance, the excessive, transgressive, and boundary-breaking pleasure that edges the frontier between pain and pleasure. As Rosie Braidotti points out, fantasies, desires, and the pursuit of pleasure play as important and constructive a role in subjectivity as rational judgment and standard political action. I contend that these representations are especially important for Asian American women who are still seen as becoming American. After all, the master narrative of citizenship is contingent upon passage through gendered, sexualized, and racialized states of becoming. Born on January 3, 1961, a 14-year-old Joan Chen was scouted by Mao Zedong's wife and cast 2 years later in her first film, Qingchuan. She became a national celebrity after starring in the 1979 Xiaohua. Chen refers to her then fame as a nuisance, choosing to leave China to study film production in the US, where film producer Dino De Laurentiis discovered the bilingual actress and cast her as a sexually submissive barbarian queen in Taipan, and barbarian queen in quotes, of course. That role led to her casting as Empress Wang Jun in Bernardo Bertolucci's award-winning The Last Emperor. Chen has since become an American citizen, continuing to work as both actress and director in the US and China. Chen's most visible role in the US is as Josie Packard in David Lynch's critically acclaimed television series Twin Peaks, which aired in 1990 to 91. Newsweek magazine declared the show a cultural phenomenon, stating, quote, "Trendiness had become as simple as turning on the TV each Thursday evening, and then at work the next day, pretending you understood what the hell was going on." Superficially, the plot follows Detective Dale Cooper in his attempts to solve the murder of the town's beloved homecoming queen, Laura Palmer. However, beneath the face of normalcy lurks dark and sinister truths, and this is a spoiler alert, one of which is that the man who raped and murdered Laura was none other than her own father, possessed by an evil spirit simply called Bob. More than a detective story, the surrealist serial drama performs an allegorical autopsy on small-town American lives and secrets, with a metaphysical bent. Among the preternatural events taking place in Twin Peaks is a series of doubles that emerge. Bob and Leland Palmer, Bob and Dale Cooper, Laura and her identical cousin Maddie, both played by actress Sheryl Lee, and as I will illustrate, Laura, the blonde white teenager, and Josie, the young Chinese-American woman. A key character, Josie was a Hong Kong prostitute who immigrated to the US to live with her husband in Twin Peaks, Washington. After her husband dies in a boating accident, Josie takes ownership of Packard's sawmill, becoming an influential member of the township. Vain and beautiful, Josie plays the role of exotic foreigner in a predominantly Caucasian town. Also an exotic foreigner in Hollywood, Chen was only the second Asian American actress since the 1950s to have a significant recurring role on American primetime television. The Asian American body, little seen in public media during the early 90s, lacked the public recognition and identification as American, and I would argue that the same is true today. When a performer of Asian descent appears on screen, her visible difference strains common sense notions of American embodiment, producing excess in the form of uncommon or nonsense. Intimately related to the sensorium of the body, sense-making is not only a cognitive, but also an affective event. Thus, the uncommon sense provoked by viewing an Asian actor is felt as an affective jolt, which registers the actor's startling Asian ethnicity as embodiment before an assessment of character is made. In his work, Lynch persistently challenges logic and sense by cultivating actors' histrionic performances and displaced affect, dreamlike sequences, and surreal mise-en-scène. Therefore, in order to destabilize, unsettle, and provoke sense itself, Lynch introduces Twin Peaks with the exotic face of Joan Chen in the pilot's opening sequence. And here I will just play a clip. This is the opening of the very first episode. However, for Asian Americans who do not have the common pleasure of seeing many Asian people in American media, the sight of another Asian face simply makes sense as a kind of self-recognition. Whereas Deleuze offers the image of the man without name, family, qualities, without self or I, as a shattering or effacing of individuality within the realms of nonsense, Lynch manifests this radically unknowable being of transformation in the evil spirit of Bob, as well as with Josie, who transmorphs, another spoiler alert, into a wooden knob by the end of the series. In a parallel storyline to the investigation of Laura's murder, Twin Peaks residents probe into Josie's murky Hong Kong past, trying to understand this mysterious woman. Who was Laura Palmer and who is Josie Packard are questions juxtaposed, as both women represent epistemological limitations about what can be known about them. While Laura's identical-looking cousin Maddie is a reference to Hitchcock's Vertigo, Josie conjures up an even more disturbing notion of the double. Like the opening shot that we just saw of Josie's mirrored image, Josie is also a reflection of Laura, the impossible object of male desire around which the series pivots. As Laura's student, both figuratively and literally, Laura was Josie's English tutor. Josie is the exotic embodiment of Laura's returning gaze from beyond the grave, one that is unapproachable, yet is endlessly pursued. By the end of this series, Josie, like Laura, meets a tragic demise as a consequence of her indecipherable, desiring nature. She literally becomes objectified, her soul trapped in a wooden bedside table knob after she dies from fear, thus foreclosing all further understanding of her character. Josie's inexplicable death invokes the hysterical performances of grief and unfulfilled desire by the men who continue to love her in her absence. Nevertheless, despite the narrative foreclosure of Josie's own jouissance, for Asian American women, Josie's embodiment provokes self-recognition and an uncommon sense of pleasure. Todd McGowan writes, Lynch's films allow for a momentary experience of the gaze that occurs when the worlds of fantasy and desire intersect. An embodiment of the undomesticated gaze, Blue Velvet's Dorothy Valens, played here by Isabella Rossellini, is irreducible to any phantasmatic identification. Similar to the speculation surrounding Dorothy's passions and the posthumous unearthing of Laura's secrets, inquiries into Josie's death are spurred by her death. Her lover, Town Sheriff Harry Truman, asks Josie's sister-in-law, what made her do the things she did? What was she after? To which Catherine replies, early in her life, she must have learned the lesson that she could survive by being what other people wanted to see, by showing them that, and whatever was left of her private life, she may have never shown to anyone. It is precisely that which is never shown to anyone. In other words, the object of desire's returning gaze that produces jouissance, excessive and transgressive pleasures. Just as Twin Peaks strews enigmas like pine needles, savoring pocket after pocket of peculiarity while deferring resolution indefinitely, the enigmatic embodiment of Chen as Josie illustrates the deferred resolution on the Asian American woman. The idea that Josie survived by being what other people wanted to see echoes the assimilative demands on Asian American women, whether to conform to the model minority stereotype or to pressures of sexual assimilation via hypererotic performativity, to name two. Indeed, the unresolved narrative of Josie's mysterious demise is an unconscious analogy for the indefinite reconciliation of the foreign other. Commonly asked, where are you from? Asian Americans are viewed as foreigners, suspended in becoming, a notion uncannily invoked by the term for citizenship, naturalization. Be that as it may, there are pleasures to be found in the state of becoming, as Josie demonstrates. In the show's second season, Josie's in-laws force her to become their maid as punishment for her complicity in the assassination attempt on her husband. In addition to the unmaid-like decoration of her long fake red nails, seen here in slow motion, Josie's performance subversively refutes her demoted station in the household. Here she's being interrogated, and I'd like to focus on this clip.
This was a lady from Galway.
Josie!
Yes.
We'll have our appetizers now.
Yes.
Oh, Josie, I just want you to know that even though your station in this household has changed, I intend to show you all the respect and affection that you deserve.
Thank you, Catherine. And I'll try to do the same.
Oh, and put on your little maid's cap.
Catherine, don't you think maybe you're being...
In Douglas Sirk's maternal melodrama Imitation of Life, white actress Laura Meredith and her black live-in maid Annie Johnson raise difficult daughters who resent them for different reasons. Acutely aware of society's racial hostilities towards blacks and ashamed of her own blackness, Annie's daughter Sarah Jane chooses to pass as white. In one scene, Sarah Jane spitefully greets Laura's guests with the caricatured affectations of a Southern mammy, to the distress and confusion of Laura and Annie. Elena Del Rio asserts that Sarah Jane's performance of, quote, the gestures and speech of both whiteness and blackness is perhaps the film's most subversive statement regarding the impermanence of identity, its openness to reinvention, and the non-essential ties between the body's vocabulary of gestures and movements and the particular meanings these signs mobilize in a given culture. Whereas Sirk's film historicizes the relationship between ethnic performance and service, Lynch's revision in Twin Peaks is a self-conscious parody. Chen as Josie performs subservient and hypersexualized Chineseness and puts the white fantasy of exotic femininity on display. However, her overperformance reveals pride and pleasure in her impermanent position, between whiteness and Chineseness, between the US and China, a liminal space that allows for infinite reinvention. Whereas Sarah Jane finds her liminality unbearable, Josie embraces the thresholds of the in-between. Although the presence of a Chinese-American girl next door in small-town America may seem to collapse difference, other media outlets, such as magazines, maintain much more conventional, imaginary, and commonsensical ethno-nationalist boundaries. The deferred resolution on the Asian American woman is no more evident than the October 1990 issue of Rolling Stone magazine, featuring the women of Twin Peaks. In explaining the technological, cosmetic, and discursive constructions celebrating the glow of white women, Richard Dyer writes, "Idealized white women are bathed in and permeated by light. It streams through them and falls onto them from above. In short, they glow." This Rolling Stone cover is no different in its attempt to show how the white women of Twin Peaks radiate. Despite Josie's significance on the show, no less prominent than the roles of these women, Chen is missing from the photo, as well as from the feature article inside titled "Babes in the Woods." In media interviews, Lynch has resisted the impulse to explain the, quote, disease of Dorothy Valance and of Laura Palmer, stating, "It's so beautiful just to leave it abstract." As he points out, pleasure and incomprehensibility are inextricably linked. As an incomprehensible foreign body, Chen disrupts the homogeneous fantasy of idealized white women as seen here. Nevertheless, as an embodiment of abstraction, Chen as Josie represents the point in the other that eludes the gaze, an object and subject of desire that provokes pleasure precisely because it is missing. As with her fatal objectification, the consequent deprivation of pleasures offered by Josie's body only increases pleasures for the Asian American spectator, who knows her subjectivity cannot be anchored to any single comprehensible representation. The spaces of reinvention opened up by actresses like Joan Chen have, in part, enabled performers like Lucy Liu to enter into mediated realms of desire and fantasy. Liu became famous from television shows and Hollywood blockbusters like Ally McBeal, Charlie's Angels, and Kill Bill. Despite her successes, however, comments like those made by actor Martin Freeman calling Liu, quote, "very charming but very ugly," and likening her to a dog, reveal that encounters with uncommon sense produce unease and distress. Liu's disruptive ethnic appearance in otherwise dominantly white casts and her recent casting as Watson in the Sherlock Holmes American television remake do not make sense. Rather, these interventions challenge it. Liu plays the role of a Chinatown dominatrix in the neo-noir film Payback. Pearl is impervious to death and pain, in fact, taking pleasure in administering and receiving corporeal punishment. Often giggling and unable to contain her glee as participant voyeur in scenes of violence, Liu as Pearl's squirming, ecstatic body exceeds common sense notions of pain. An aberrant being who neither makes sense nor perceives it, Pearl undergoes trials of pain as a kind of neophyte, similar to ones described in mythical ritualistic rites of passage. Victor Turner writes, quote, "The subject of passage ritual is, in the liminal period, structurally, if not physically, invisible. As an embodiment of becoming, Pearl is betwixt and between human and non-human, Chinese and American. She and her bodily sensations are structurally invisible. Nevertheless, as I have suggested, the enigmatic performances of liminal Asian American bodies produce a kind of pleasure or jouissance for the always already lost object of desire. By challenging and destabilizing common sense ideas through corporeal performance, Josie and Pearl resist the mastery of the gaze, creating a space for inventive and fluid subjectivities. Such characters and their desires can never be known, but it is exactly this incomprehensibility that opens up a space of radical alterity, transformation, and finally, pleasure." Thank you very much.